before we do that, we need to let them know that we have something else going on in the playroom. So who's in the playroom right now?
Robert.
Robert? Robert Wood. Robert Wood is going to be doing Spirit Aura. Robert, what are you going to do in your room right now?
Moon.
Unmute
Well,
yourself.
anyone that wants to talk to me about their aura colors, their soul, will pick some crystal stones for them and do some talking about any questions or things they want to know about.
Come see Robert. He's
chat.
amazing. Just not just a chit chat. Come experience Robert. He's a palm reader, an aura reader. He's a soul connect.
That's right.
Awesome. He's from Colorado. He's up in the mountains with the rest of us. So please go join Robert as we bring Xavier into the room and the Healers Network.
Now I gotta go to playroom, I guess, huh?
Yeah, you're gonna go to playroom. We're gonna move you there if you can't do it yourself. Everybody go join him in number 1. And number 2, we have the Healers Network Lounge, and then we're gonna bring Xavier in.
And let me tell you all about Xavier. Xavier is a light worker. He helps people navigate the chaos of the inner psyche so that they can evolve and live their best lives in the outer world. The work he does focuses on what is hidden in the unconscious mind. He helps people shine a light on what's been tucked away in the back of the mind. He's a human potential architect and a truthsayer. He helps clients dismantle the false reality which they create so that they can write a new narrative for themselves. His website is lionlightworker.com. Please welcome Xavier Frye. Welcome, Xavier.
Thank you, Vic. What a nice introduction. Yeah, so let's just go on and just get right into it, shall we? So let's see, there we go. I think I can make this work. Is looking okay to y'all? Yeah? Everybody can see all this just fine? Uh-oh.
Perfect.
Went the wrong way. Excuse me. All right, let's do this. So, shadow work, bringing awareness and acceptance to the inner psyche. So what is shadow work exactly? According to science, the average person uses about 10% of their brain. The other 90% of what goes on inside our minds occurs in the unconscious, that is, without our knowing or our awareness. The unconscious houses our deep emotions, subconscious desires, memories, and our fears. While we are young and still innocent, before we've learned how the world works and how to protect ourselves, life will deal its hand and we inevitably learn about pain. Perhaps mom and dad go through a divorce, or perhaps one of the parents may have been abusive or absent. Maybe a theocracy imposed on us at a young age had a terrible impact on our development. Perhaps the parental figures had poor communication skills and resorted to yelling as a default. Then, as we get older and we start to experience life outside of our family, we may find ourselves wounded from people other than our parents. Perhaps bullies had a negative impact on you in childhood. Maybe your first girlfriend dumped you within hours of saying yes for the other kid that sat next to you in band class that you thought was one of your best friends. Other people might have abused you, people that you thought you were safe around. These are just a couple of examples, and I'm sure anyone listening right now could come up with even more painful and dramatic examples. I'm talking about this even a little bit might have even caused some discomfort for more than a few of you. That pain and discomfort that you feel at the mention of these things is but a mere echo of what was once felt when it originally happened. As time progresses, we learn to adapt to these stimuli and learn to be comfortable with them. Abuse becomes a norm and trauma responses become a default. We learn to cope with our pain and become high functioning despite them. We compartmentalize these behaviors and we tuck them away and we hide them. We forget about them and we go about our lives. Some of you might be thinking, oh, that's just life. Everybody has had something like that. What's the big deal? The trouble with all this is that the unconscious is far more powerful than the conscious part of the brain. The unconscious is what rules our perceptions and beliefs around the world, ourselves, and important arenas in life such as self-worth, respect, and love. The unconscious is what the rest of the world is created from. Anyone who's in the New Age community and heard of the law of attraction knows this. What you focus on turns into your reality. That would sound easy, right? You'd think so, but that logic is flawed. Do you remember when I was talking about the 90% of the unconscious? Well, that's the majority of the brain. If your unconscious mind doesn't agree with the fluffy new age affirmations that you're spouting off, you're literally just wasting your breath and your energy. Every part of your being, body, mind, and soul, must be in agreement about what you're vibrating. If you don't believe that you're worthy of love, it will be impossible to find it. How is one to find true love without the hope that it even exists? If you don't think you are deserving of the things that you desire, they will never actually come to you. It is impossible to manifest your dreams if your unconscious is putting out a contradictory vibration to what your conscious mind is putting out into the universe. This is similar to a stringed instrument that is not properly tuned. The sound that comes from it are dissonant and unpleasant. No one is going to listen to gather around a guitar player who can't tune his instrument. So what manifests in the outer world is a reflection of what's going on in the inner. There's a Hermetic axiom from the Golden Dawn which states, to cause a change from without, one must cause a change from within. This is one of my favorite quotes as far as universal gold nuggets are concerned. This means that if you want to change the way that life looks in the outer realm, you must handle what's going on in the inner. You must bring order to your chaos. You will continue to attract people that trigger you in the ways that your parents did until you forgive them, until you get over it, until you handle it. You will continue to repeat performances of your traumas and manifest situations and people in life that reinforce them until the work to reprogram these beliefs is completed. Truth provides awareness to what has been forgotten in the dark of the unconscious. The first step of solving a problem is admitting that you actually have a problem. When you have awareness of the problem, then you can actually make some steps toward fixing it. Here's a little Gloria Steinem. I'm a fan of hers. She says, the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off. Engaging consciously in the unconscious is the definition of shadow work. This isn't an easy thing to do by oneself because of the pain and the fear that has been left to fester and grow unchecked by the unconscious mind. They are wounds after all. As time goes on, these unchecked shadows become the basis of what is created in our reality. The conscious mind can only do so much with only 10% of the brain's bandwidth. Many different great thinkers have tried to pierce the veil of consciousness and shine a little light on our shadow selves. The first guy I'm going to talk about is Carl Jung. He spoke on and coined the term projections. You've probably heard this word before. Projecting is a self-defense mechanism that is initiated by the subconscious that puts the issues outside of oneself onto another. A lot of times the projection has little to do with the person they've been put upon. These projections prevent the person that is doing them from actually looking inward at the wound itself. Why? Because it's painful. Left unchecked, these unconscious issues manifest into self-sabotage, violence, escapism, and other negative coping mechanisms. Ironically, instead of keeping the person safe, they actually wind up creating more instances that reinforce the negative beliefs and behavior patterns that are causing the problems in the first place. So until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That was a quote by Carl Jung. Another great thinker that deserves the mention of the realm and the psyche would be Sigmund Freud. He's known as the father of psychoanalysis. Some of Freud's work has been posthumously discredited due to his extremism in the realms of psyche and sexuality. However, his work still holds some validity and is the stepping stone from which psychology developed itself from. His studies pointed out various neuroses and attachments that revolve around different styles of parenting. Freud took note that the various differences between parental involvements during different phases in childhood that played a way in the way people behaved in their adult life. For example, if in childhood the mother was distant and cold, her child would likely be drawn to dismissive and cold partners. Someone with an abusive father will likely have issues with men throughout their life. Yeah, like I said, Sigmund, yeah, he got a little extreme with his own projections, I think. You know, everybody's heard of the Freudian slip, so that's where that guy comes from. And then we're going to also talk about Pavlov. Pavlov is another psychologist who studied the behavior of his animals when he went to go feed them. He noticed that over time, his dogs would salivate every time he took food out to them. And he wanted to experiment to see if he could get those dogs to respond the same way to something different. So he started to bring a dinner bell with him when it was time to go to food, and he would ring the bell, and the dogs learned to associate the bell with the food or the feeding time, right? And so he noticed that after a while, he could just ring the bell and the dogs would salivate, okay? So another guy named John P. Watson wanted to improve upon Pavlov's experiment. He's very famous for an incredibly inhumane experiment. He did an experiment on a little baby named Albert, in which he basically he came into the room with the baby and screamed at it and shouted and made lots of noise and got the baby all agitated. And eventually, and he would just do this every time he saw the baby. Eventually, he would start to bring a white rat with him and also stimulate the baby in the same ways. So the baby learned to associate this white rat with things to be afraid of and to cry about and to be fearful of. And so the long story short of this is that they found that the things that are in common with all of these is they found that the neutral variables, i.e., the food or the noises, created a natural response, right? The conditioned variable was the bell or the rat. And so what they found is that if you can basically teach a baby to be afraid of a mouse just by being mean every time there's a mouse around, just imagine what can happen with small children and their families. You know, so now that I've hammered on exactly what shadow work is and why it is what it is and what's important and why we need to pay attention to all this, let's have a look at what's going on in the world. I think 2020 has been a very dramatic year. And I think it's been a year of some collective, some forced imposed collective shadow work on all of us. You know, we've had pandemic, we've got fires, civil unrest, cancel culture, and collective call out as we dig our heels in on how we as a collective treat one another. Not to mention, you know, we had a lot of astrological things that went down that really just kind of contributed to some of the stuff that was going on. This meme here was something that I posted on my own Instagram back in June. We had Saturn in Aquarius, which was the last time that happened was the Rodney King riots. Pluto was in Capricorn in June, and that was during the American Revolution. And then Neptune was in Pisces the last time when Rome fell. So in June, we had all three of those things happening at the same time. So without getting too far into what that might mean with all these planets dancing around doing their things, we're going through some major upheaval as a collective and really having to examine ourselves on a big level as well as on an individual level. So one of these things that really, really, really needs to be paid attention to is the racism. I feel like, quite frankly, that is a big, big issue as far as our overall collective shadow work is concerned. And particularly here between the BIPOCs and the white folks here in America. Racism is a learned negative behavior that has been cultivated through generations of reinforcement. Unfortunately, up until recently, this problem has been treated like a non-issue since the civil rights movement. The BIPOCs have had their fair share of trauma passed down through the ages from the environment as well as within their family unit. There's a lot of unprocessed emotions that I believe have programmed and kept us in a held down paradigm. On the same coin, white folks seem to be experiencing a cognitive dissonance with theirs. A large majority of white folks don't believe it's actually happening or say things like they don't see color, but in the same breath feel the need to silence and downplay the BIPOC's experience when they speak on the issue. The other percentage seems to be in shock that these issues are still happening and have some guilt that needs to be processed and worked through. Some of you listening may disagree with what I'm saying in regards to racism. Some of you may have the urge to argue with me with this after the fact. And those of you that fall into that category would do well to remember that we are a collective, and remember what I was saying about our psyche and the skeletons in the collective closet. Well, these are only coming up because they have not been given the proper attention that they deserve. Issues are valid, and just like the wounds or the subjects in the experiments that I mentioned earlier with Watson and Pavlov were conditioned to behave that way. So do the BIPOC's traumas and feelings about their past need to be honored and respected as well. Not for nothing, but our DNA has memories. So all of this stuff is still very, very much present. And, we quite frankly haven't, we still got some ways to go as far as all that is concerned. There's some major acceptance that needs to be that needs to happen before we can move through all of that. So one thing I noticed in particular is that in my work, humans tend to put their emotions within a toxic binary of good and bad. It is natural to want to put things in terms of good and bad because humans respond to pleasure and pain. Pleasurable feelings get thrown in the box of good, and the heavier feelings get lumped in the box of bad. The trouble with this is that emotions are neither good or bad. Some may feel much better than others, but neither are inherently good or bad. Emotions themselves are just emotions, and the emotions are part of the body's way of communicating with the mind and soul. And, it's not about the binary. It's more about the duality. Feelings exist on a polarity spectrum, much like hot and cold. Where does hot start and cold begin? They're just different degrees of the same polarity. Neither of them are good or bad, and the mind is what interprets and adds the notion of good and bad. There's no need to run from the unpleasant feelings in the emotional spectrum because they're necessary. It lets you know when something isn't right. They let you know when boundaries need to be created and when you need to protect yourself and when you need to make some changes. So to ignore these would be hazardous to your psyche and health. Laughter can be expressed using joy, anger, or tears. And the same can be said about sadness. Once again, I remind you that these emotions exist on a polarity. The emotions themselves aren't good or bad, they're neutral. What we do with them, however, is another thing entirely. In my experience, I have found that most people, especially as spiritual folks, tend to try and stay above their negative experiences. They ignore the negative feelings by judging themselves and everyone around them while trying to kill their ego. This is a fool's journey that cannot actually be done. The ego is no criminal. The ego's is just one's way of expressing themselves on the material plane outside of the collective. There isn't anything wrong with it. It's not supposed to go anywhere, and you certainly can't kill it. It's an integral part of your being, and it's only doing its job, which is to seek pleasure and avoid pain at whatever cost. It's simply necessary for survival. Ironically, the thought of killing the ego is a ploy of an overactive ego. Light workers that ignore the shadow aspects of their mantle are doing themselves and the people that they work with a disservice. Without delving into the shadows and integrating the changes into the subconscious, none of the work on the outside in the conscious realms will take hold or have any substance or sustenance. Just as a negative and positive connection need to be made in order for an electrical current to properly travel and ground itself, so too must humans experience the polarity of their emotions. Without that balance between the negative and the positive emotions, there is no growth and flow in life. We must stop associating good with light and evil with darkness. What happens when you close your eyes? Darkness. What happens when you plant seed in the soil? More darkness. And what happens when there's a baby in the womb? What is that baby in? Nothing but darkness for 9 to 10 months. So we've got to stop looking at darkness as if it's an evil thing and hiding from it, because that's really where change in creation occurs. So like I said, darkness is not evil. Light is not good. Evil can look you dead in the eye in broad daylight, and you might not even notice it. So this is a hard pill to swallow, but that's what shadow work is anyway. It's not fluffy, it's not easy, and a lot of times it requires the assistance of someone who has done that work within themselves to hold space for another to work through theirs. This is what I believe light workers are actually here to do. And we travel down with the individual into their private hell and assist them in their deep inner work, because they wouldn't have normally done it alone. Over the years, I spent a lot of time studying some different modalities. I found that I enjoy using the tarot to help people connect with their inner psyche, and to just kind of put things out on the table so they're not like so dramatic. These cards provide the first step in acknowledging that there is indeed a problem. Once the cards are out on the table, we're able to look at these things with a bird's eye view and assess what limiting beliefs, traumas, and baggage needs to be accepted and released. It's best to look the truth in the eye and accept what is there. Once that awareness is gained, a plan can be made and the work can be done, can be begun. This is just like getting a diagnosis from the doctor. Another modality that I have seen a lot of growth with my clients is Reiki and the human design concept. It's a unique synthesis of a lot of modalities, and I've gotten a little ahead of myself, excuse me. But Reiki is a very soft energy that is a loving, healing, universal concept that just kind of flows through the person and gently helps fill the person up and move through these things. It's very gentle, it's very powerful, and with some consistency, it can most definitely make some dramatic impacts and shifts in another person's being. It helps the body let go. It helps the body's natural healing process accelerate. And it really, you can't really overdo it because it has all these built-in safeguards in it. It doesn't even actually tire out the person that's actually performing it. So it's super safe, it's super gentle, and it's really effective. And the other thing that I'm super into is what's called human design. And human design is a concept that combines multiple modalities like the I Ching and the Kabbalah and the Hindu Brahmin chakra system. And, it cross-references numerology and your birth date from the day you were born and 88 days before you were born. So you get this very unique chart called a body graph. Let me see if I can move this down real fast. I'll just show you some bodies that I've done recently. And the body graph basically is your own personal blueprint for what you are, who you are, how you operate in the rest of the world. My computer is acting a little slowly right now, so I'll just go to this one instead. And it shows you just you. It shows if you like a lot of operating in the world as you are is to operate as you are. And this stuff shows you how you got here. Okay, this stuff shows you how you showed up in the world and not what you became due to societal conditioning and due to what shows up in your life. So these colored in stuff shows what's not going to change about me. And the white stuff is going to show what does change about me. And depending on where you were born, what day you were born and what happened and what the planets were doing, this whole chart can look completely different. And so this is a very unique style of mindfulness and self-mastery tool that I've picked up on. I've been studying it for about 6 or 7 years. It's very useful. It shows you, it gives you a lot of whys, and it gives you a necessary awareness so that you can catch yourself when you're in your dramas and making bad decisions and making things that are going to, and in your quote unquote, not self, that creates all these baggages and things that you got to deal with later in life. Okay. So let's see here. Let me get back to this. And yeah, so that's that. This is very important stuff. I think these are me in particular want to, I find myself, anytime I do a reading, it winds up getting into these shadowy things anyway. So I figured I might as well knuckle down on it and hone in and, escort y'all through these places and sit with this stuff and be with these things. I also do a lot of one-on-one work with my clients, and I am all as far as who you are and what you're becoming and how you're being in life. And like I said, if you're in alignment with who you are and you know who you are and where all this stuff came from, you can look at all these things that we've discovered through the other processes in a very objective way with some awareness, and can tackle it with, instead of just being at the whimsy of your emotions and your stress and these negative stories in the back of the mind that keep you in the certain place that you are. And like I said earlier, without this shadow work, there's literally no point in making all of those fluffy affirmations and things, because your body, your mind, and your soul have to all be resonating with that same thing like a tuned instrument in order for that harmony to occur and to attract that resonance in the first place. So if you'd like to work with me later, you can reach out to me on my website, www.lionlightworker.com. I also, like I said, I've been doing readings since I was 14. I've got the same deck of tarot cards that I started out with. Very reliable, very nice guy. And I'm, very eager to help you folks break through some of these conversations and really make some tangible changes. Because I find that, it's nice to go to a therapist and talk about all these things, but, until those, talking about it is only going to do so much, and so that's where these things come through, and that's how we go from there. So if you'd like to work with me later, feel free to reach out to me on my website. I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at lionlightworker. And I'll also be in the fun room here in a little while to do a collective reading and help pinpoint some of these shadows and things that we may have been ignoring as a whole. So,
Xavier, our deepest gratitude. We're resonating with your wisdom, your heart, and your compassion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Follow him, everybody, right now to room number 9. If